In the heart of California, there is a story that reads like a crime novel, but it is all too real. Two men, Ruben and Emilio, walked into a religious community called His Way Spirit-led Assemblies, and never walked out again. Their families have searched. Investigators have probed. But what they discovered inside the Assemblies was more than just a church. It was a closed world bound by secrecy, loyalty, and fear. This is not the story of simple faith. It is the story of control, silence, and the line where devotion turns into something darker. Two disappearances that to this day remain unsolved. Were they victims of foul play? Did they try to escape and vanish? Or were they silenced because they knew too much? Tonight, we unravel the evidence. We follow the trail of missing persons reports, cryptic journals, and whispered testimonies from those who dared to leave. And we ask a chilling question: if a religious community can hold secrets this deep, how many other families across America are still waiting for justice? This is more than a disappearance. This is a crime hidden in plain sight. This is the true crime story of the His Way Spirit-led Assemblies. Sometimes the most haunting mysteries don't begin with a scream, or a police siren, or a frantic crowd. Sometimes, they begin with silence. A silence so complete, it leaves nothing behind except questions. In California, two men simply vanished years apart, yet bound by a connection that would later unravel into something much darker than anyone imagined. Ruben Moreno was like any other man in his community. He had routines, friends, and a family who cared deeply for him. But in 2019, Ruben's life took a strange turn. He became involved with a religious group known as the His Way Spirit-led Assemblies. To some, it looked like a place of faith and hope. To others, it seemed secretive, demanding more than just devotion. Then, one day, Ruben was gone. No clear trace. No phone calls. No signs of struggle. He simply disappeared. His family filed a missing persons report, but answers never came. 4 years later, it happened again. This time, the man's name was Emilio Gainham. Like Ruben, Emilio had ties to the same religious group. And like Ruben, his disappearance sent shockwaves through his circle of friends and family. The similarities were impossible to ignore. A man drawn into a secretive organization. A sudden and unexplained disappearance. And once again, no closure, no answers. Two men. Two vanishings. Both connected to the same group. For investigators, this was no longer coincidence. The question became, what is happening behind the closed doors of the His Way Spirit-led Assemblies? Were these men victims of foul play? Did they choose to leave everything behind? Or were they silenced to protect secrets too dangerous to expose? For the families, the pain is unending. Every birthday, every holiday, every empty chair at the table is a reminder that Ruben and Emilio are still missing. And for them, silence is not an answer. They continue to search, to ask, and to demand the truth. But the truth may be far more disturbing than anyone is prepared to hear. This is where our story begins, not with answers, but with questions. And the more we search, the deeper we find ourselves pulled into a world of secrecy, fear, and faith. In the next chapter, we turn to the people who lived in the shadow of this group, the community that began to whisper as the disappearances grew impossible to ignore. When one person goes missing, it is a tragedy. But when two men vanish linked by faith, by place, and by silence, it becomes something far more unsettling. In California, the disappearances of Ruben Moreno and Emilio Ganem didn't just leave families grieving. They left entire neighborhoods asking a haunting question: could it happen to us too? For the families, the pain was immediate. Ruben's disappearance tore open a wound that never healed. His relatives organized searches, spoke to the media, and pleaded with police to keep the case alive. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, hope began to fade. Then came Emilio. His family knew what Ruben's family had already learned: the system was slow, the answers scarce, and the silence overwhelming. For them, each day felt like a battle against time, memory, and despair. As the disappearances gained attention, whispers began to spread. The His Way Spirit-led Assemblies, once just another small church in California, was suddenly at the center of fearful speculation. Some neighbors spoke of strange behaviors. Others admitted they avoided the group altogether, afraid of what they didn't understand. In a close-knit community, suspicion turned into fear, and fear turned into silence. Law enforcement faced difficult questions. Was this just coincidence, two men choosing to leave? Or was there a darker force at play? At first, Ruben's case was treated as many missing adult cases are. He was considered an adult free to disappear if he wished. But after Emilio vanished, investigators began to see what families already knew: this was not random. Theories flooded the community. Some believed Ruben and Emilio had simply walked away, tired of the strict control of the Assemblies. Others whispered that they had discovered something dangerous, something worth silencing. With no bodies and no direct evidence, anything seemed possible. And the uncertainty only fueled the fear. Over time, the fear became its own prison. Families feared retaliation. Neighbors avoided questions. Even those who had left the Assemblies hesitated to speak out. Silence spread, not because there was nothing to say, but because people were too afraid to say it. And in that silence, the mystery only grew darker. Two men vanished. Families searched. A community whispered. And still, the His Way Spirit-led Assembly stood silent, its doors closed, its secrets locked away. But behind those walls, the story was far from over. To understand the true weight of these disappearances, we must step inside the group itself and ask, who are they, and what are they hiding? The name alone carries mystery: the His Way Spirit-led Assemblies. To outsiders, it sounds like just another small religious fellowship. But to those who've encountered the group, it's something very different. For decades, whispers about its leaders, its teachings, and its control over members have persisted. And now, with two men missing, the questions surrounding this group have never been more urgent. The Assemblies trace their roots back to a split from mainstream Christianity. According to documents and testimonies, the group was founded on the belief that the outside world, including most other churches, was poisoned by sin and compromise. Followers believed they had found a pure, Spirit-led path. To the faithful, this was truth. To critics, it was isolation. At the center of the Assemblies was its leadership, charismatic, forceful, and unquestioned. Members describe a system where obedience was not optional. To question the leader was to question God Himself. Over time, this authority created a wall of silence, making it nearly impossible for outsiders, or even insiders, to challenge what was happening behind closed doors. While the assemblies preached devotion and purity, former members painted darker picture. They described strict rules, intense pressure to conform, and warnings of dire consequences for those who dared to leave. For some, these teachings created deep faith. For others, they felt like chains. The missing cases of Ruben Moreno and Emilio Ganem weren't the first time questions were raised. Over the years, whispers of financial exploitation, manipulation, and broken families followed the assemblies. Some former members even claimed people who left were tracked, pressured, or vanished without explanation. These allegations were never fully investigated, but in the wake of Ruben and Emilio's disappearances, they take on chilling new weight. When questions came, the assemblies rarely answered. Leaders often denied wrongdoing, dismissing critics as liars or traitors. To this day, the group has maintained its secrecy, rarely speaking to media, refusing interviews, and keeping its inner workings hidden. And in that silence, suspicion grows. Because silence in a case like this doesn't erase doubt, it fuels it. So who are the His Way Spirit-led assemblies? To some, a spiritual refuge. To others, a dangerous cult. But in the cases of Ruben Moreno and Emilio Ganem, their connection to this group may hold the key to everything. To uncover the truth, we must go deeper, not just into what the assemblies believe, but into the people who dared to walk away, and the secrets they carried with them. For years, the His Way Spirit-led assemblies kept its secrets tightly guarded. But those who left, those who broke free, carry stories too heavy to ignore. Stories of faith turned into fear. Stories of devotion twisted into control. And stories that may help explain what happened to Ruben Moreno and Emilio Ganem. Leaving was never easy. Members described the assemblies as a place where leaving wasn't just discouraged, it was considered betrayal. For some, the pressure was suffocating. For others, it was fear that kept them inside for so long. But eventually, a few found the courage to walk away. And with that decision came both freedom and risk. Control took many forms. Members described financial dependence, strict codes of behavior, and constant fear of divine punishment. In this environment, free will was eroded, replaced by obedience and silence. And for those who resisted, the consequences were devastating. When Ruben disappeared, whispers spread quietly among the faithful. Some say they noticed tension between him and leaders. Others recall he seemed restless, questioning the group's strict rules. Then he was gone. When Emilio vanished, the fear became sharper. Former members now wonder, were these disappearances accidents, choices, or warnings? Many survivors carry guilt, haunted by the feeling they could have done more, or spoken louder. But for years, fear silenced them. Fear of retaliation. Fear of being shunned. Fear of something far worse. Even now, speaking about the assemblies brings back the same anxiety. Some agreed to share their stories only under conditions of anonymity. Their fear lingers, like a shadow that never leaves. So why speak now? For many, the answer is simple. They speak for Ruben. They speak for Emilio. They speak for the families left without answers, and for the next person who might vanish if no one pays attention. For them, silence is no longer an option. The voices from within paint a chilling picture of a group where fear, control, and silence thrived. But testimonies alone are not enough to solve a mystery. To understand what really happened, we must look at the investigations, the missed clues, the unanswered questions, and the trail of evidence left behind. This is Chapter 5, Following the Evidence. The disappearances of Ruben Moreno and Emilio Ganem weren't just personal tragedies, they became criminal puzzles. And like all unsolved cases, the search for answers lives in the details. The files, the witness accounts, the overlooked leads. To follow the evidence is to retrace the steps investigators took, and the ones they missed. Ruben Moreno was last seen leaving a local meeting tied to the Assemblies. He told no one where he was going. His car was later found parked blocks away from his home. No signs of struggle. No obvious clues. For police, this looked like an adult simply walking away. But to his family, that explanation never made sense. Ruben had roots. He had commitments. And he had no reason to vanish. Then came Emilio. Unlike Ruben, Emilio's disappearance drew faster attention because it happened after Ruben. His phone went silent, his social media accounts froze, and his family sounded the alarm. This time, investigators couldn't dismiss it so easily. Lightning had struck twice, in the same group, under eerily similar circumstances. Patterns began to emerge. Ruben and Emilio didn't just vanish, they vanished in nearly identical ways. Both were last seen after Assemblies meetings. Both left behind no trace. And both cases left families frustrated at how little progress was being made. Theories swirled in police notes. Did Ruben and Emilio walk away willingly, tired of the Assembly's grip? Did they stumble upon secrets the group wanted buried? Or was their faith itself weaponized against them, convincing them to cut off everything they knew? Each theory carried weight. But none carried proof. For the families, frustration mounted. Tips came in but went nowhere. Leads were opened, then closed. Digital evidence, like cell phone pings and financial records, wasn't always followed to its full extent. With each passing month, the trail grew colder. What was once a case slowly began to look like a file collecting dust. The evidence left more questions than answers. 2 men. 2 files. 2 families still waiting. But if the official investigation stalled, another effort rose to take its place. An effort led not by police, but by ordinary people, journalists, and former members who refused to stay silent. This is Chapter 6, The Investigators Outside the Badge. When official investigations slowed, others stepped in. Families, journalists, and even strangers on the internet refused to let Ruben Moreno and Emilio Ganem become just names on missing person posters. These outsiders, without badges, but armed with persistence, dug into the shadows the Assemblies left behind. Reporters began asking uncomfortable questions. Why had Ruben's case gone cold so quickly? Why did Emilio's disappearance echo the same chilling pattern? And most of all, why was the Assembly so silent? For journalists, the story was more than 2 missing men. It was about secrecy, power, and fear. When answers didn't come from law enforcement, the families created their own investigations. Ruben's relatives went door to door, asking neighbors what they had seen. Emilio's friends took to the internet, building online campaigns to keep his name alive. In many ways, their work uncovered more leads than official files ever did. As the spotlight grew, so did courage. Former members of the Assemblies began reaching out to families and reporters. They described strange behavior, strict secrecy, and the unspoken rule: what happens inside the assembly stays there. For some, Ruben and Emilio's disappearances were the breaking point, the reason they finally spoke. The internet became its own investigation board. Podcasters covered the story in detail, sparking discussions in online forums. Some sleuths analyzed financial filings, others combed through social media footprints. One discovery led to another, and soon, a web of connections began to emerge that had gone unnoticed in official reports. But this wave of outside investigation wasn't welcomed by everyone. Journalists found doors slammed in their faces. Families were told to stop asking questions. Former members who spoke publicly described feeling watched, followed, even threatened. For some, it seemed clear, the closer you got to the truth, the more dangerous the silence became. Without badges or official power, these outsiders pushed the case further than anyone expected. They uncovered patterns, revealed secrets, and forced the story back into public view. But with new attention came new pressure and new dangers. Because if Ruben and Emilio were silenced, what would happen to those who refused to stay quiet? To understand the disappearances of Ruben Moreno and Emilio Gainem, we must understand the environment they were part of. The His Way Spirit-led Assemblies didn't operate like a typical church. Behind its doors was a world built on power, obedience, and silence. And once inside, it was nearly impossible to break free. Experts call it the cult playbook. Step 1: elevate a leader to unquestionable status. Step 2: cut members off from outsiders who might challenge that authority. Step 3: replace independent thought with strict obedience. Survivors say the Assemblies checked every box. Once inside, the line between faith and control blurred until there was no line at all. Fear was the glue that held the Assemblies together. Fear of spiritual damnation if you questioned the leader. Fear of losing family and friends if you walked away. Fear of being labeled an enemy of God. And in some testimonies, fear of something more tangible, punishment that came not from heaven, but from those who controlled the assemblies on earth. Information was tightly managed. Members were discouraged from reading outside sources, watching mainstream news, or even engaging with relatives who might plant doubts. The leader's word was law, and alternative perspectives were treated as poison. This information lockdown created a closed loop of belief, one that made the assemblies nearly impenetrable to outsiders, and almost impossible to leave. The assemblies didn't just control belief. They controlled livelihoods. Members described being pressured to give financially, sometimes beyond their means. Others worked in jobs connected to the church itself, tying their income directly to their obedience. Leaving didn't just mean losing your faith community. It meant losing your stability, your safety net, and sometimes, your entire identity. This system of power and control may help explain what happened to Ruben and Emilio. If they challenged leadership, they may have been seen as threats. If they tried to leave, they may have carried secrets too dangerous to share. And if their vanishings were not accidents, their silence could serve another purpose, a warning to anyone else who dared to question the assemblies. The pattern is clear: control through fear, silence, and obedience. For survivors, these methods still echo long after they escape. But even as we uncover these patterns, the question remains: where are Ruben and Emilio? To answer that, we turn back to the people who refuse to give up. The families who continue to search for truth, no matter the cost. This is Chapter 8, Families on a Mission. Perfect timing. Raising hands. Chapter 8 is the emotional anchor of the documentary, The Heart. After all the fear, control, and secrecy we explored in Chapter 7, this chapter puts the spotlight on the people who refuse to stay silent, the families and loved ones of Ruben Moreno and Emilio Ganem. Behind every missing person's name is a family. Behind every cold case is a wound that refuses to heal. For Ruben Moreno and Emilio Ganem, their disappearances didn't just spark questions, they left an emptiness that their families carry every single day. And for those families, silence is not an option. For Ruben's family, the nightmare began in 2019. At first, they thought he was simply late or unreachable. But hours turned into days, and days into years. Today, they still wait for answers. One of Ruben's relatives described the pain this way: "It's like he was erased from the earth, but every corner of our house still whispers his name." For Emilio's loved ones, the story is hauntingly familiar. In 2023, he too vanished, leaving behind confusion, fear, and heartbreak. His family had seen what happened with Ruben, and now, history was repeating itself. They begged for help from authorities, but answers never came. One family member admitted, "We can't sleep at night. We wonder if he's safe, if he's alive, if he's scared." Not knowing is the cruelest part. Both families eventually turned their eyes toward the same place, the religious group their sons had been tied to. Why did two men with links to the Assemblies vanish in such similar ways? And why did the group remain silent? For families searching for closure, the silence of the Assemblies became almost as painful as the disappearances themselves. When official investigations stalled, the families refused to stop. They created awareness campaigns, organized vigils, reached out to journalists, and begged anyone with information to come forward. For them, every poster, every news story, every social media post is a chance to shake loose the truth. Their fight is not just for Ruben and Emilio. It's for every missing person whose name is forgotten too quickly. Time does strange things to families of the missing. Every knock at the door carries hope and dread. Every phone call could be good news or the worst news. Birthdays pass. Holidays pass. And yet, the waiting never ends. For Ruben and Emilio's families, life has become a balance between hope and despair. Between believing they might come home, and fearing they never will. The disappearances of Ruben and Emilio left more than mysteries, they left families caught in a cycle of grief and resilience. Their search is ongoing. Their mission is simple: to bring their loved ones home, or at least bring their stories to light. But the deeper they dig, the more resistance they face. In the next chapter, we ask, what happens when families searching for truth come up against the walls of silence, secrecy, and power? This is Chapter 9, Obstacles to Justice. For the families of Ruben Moreno and Emilio Ganem, finding answers was never just about hope, it was about justice. But justice is not always swift. And in cases like these, justice can feel impossible. From the very beginning, both cases were hindered by delays and missteps. Ruben's disappearance in 2019 raised few alarms. Adults have the right to walk away, police said. But families knew better, they knew something was wrong. By the time Emilio vanished in 2023, authorities were reluctant to connect the cases, despite the obvious similarities. And without hard evidence of foul play, their hands, they claimed, were tied. Families turned to the assemblies for help, but instead of answers, they met silence. Members avoided questions, leaders dismissed concerns, and doors quite literally closed in their faces. Was it loyalty to their leader? Fear of retaliation? Or a deliberate cover-up? To this day, no one knows. What is clear is that silence became its own weapon, one that left investigators with little to work with, and families with even less hope. Even when families pushed for more resources, they found themselves trapped in bureaucratic red tape. Different jurisdictions passing responsibility back and forth. Missing persons units understaffed. Cold case departments overwhelmed. Every delay made the trail colder. Every unanswered call chipped away at hope. But the challenges didn't stop there. Within the local community, many former members of the assemblies were hesitant to speak to law enforcement. Years of fear and mistrust made them reluctant to open up. And without witnesses willing to come forward, the cases remained stuck in limbo. For families, the greatest obstacle wasn't just bureaucracy or silence. It was the weight of waiting. Waiting for calls that never came. Waiting for meetings that ended without progress. Waiting for a justice system that seemed designed to move too slowly for the missing. As Ruben's and Emilio's families grew more vocal, they found themselves not only grieving their loved ones but fighting against the very system that was supposed to protect them. 2 men vanished. 2 families begged for help. And yet, the answers remained locked behind silence, bureaucracy, and fear. The obstacles to justice were enormous. But there was still one force working in their favor: the power of attention. In the next chapter, we examine how the media, journalists, and the court of public opinion began shining a light on the mysteries the assemblies tried so hard to keep in the dark. This is Chapter 10, Media Spotlight. When silence comes from institutions, sometimes the loudest voices come from outside. For the families of Ruben Moreno and Emilio Gainem, the turning point came when the media began to listen. What started as small local coverage soon grew into a story too haunting to ignore. At first, the disappearances barely made headlines. A missing adult, authorities said, was not unusual. But when Emilio's case mirrored Ruben's, local reporters began to connect the dots. 2 men. Both tied to the same religious group. Both gone without a trace. The local press began asking the questions authorities wouldn't or couldn't. Why were the assemblies silent? Why were 2 families living the same nightmare? For families, stepping into the media spotlight was a painful choice. Speaking on camera meant reliving the worst days of their lives. But it also meant hope, the hope that someone, somewhere, would see their story and come forward with information. Soon, the story spread beyond California. National outlets picked it up, framing the question not just as a missing persons mystery, but as a potential cult story. Was the His Way Spirit-led assemblies just another fringe religious group? Or was something far more sinister happening behind its closed doors? As traditional media began covering the story, another force amplified it further: online true crime communities. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and online forums dissected every detail, spreading awareness to audiences around the world. Theories swirled, timelines were built, and strangers on the internet became unexpected allies in the family's fight for answers. With every headline, with every podcast episode, the pressure grew. Reporters began showing up at the Assembly's doors. Authorities faced tough questions about stalled investigations. And whispers of misconduct within the group grew louder. What had once been a local mystery was now a national story. And for the families, it was proof that their fight was finally breaking through the walls of silence. The media couldn't solve the mystery, but it could shine a light on it. And with that light, shadows began to move. Whispers turned into stories. And stories turned into new revelations about what might have happened behind the doors of the His Way Spirit-led assemblies. In the next chapter, we follow the survivors, those who escaped the group, and hear their chilling testimonies. This is Chapter 11, Survivors Speak Out. Secrets can be denied. Facts can be debated. But the voices of those who lived the story are harder to silence. Tonight, for the first time, survivors of the His Way Spirit-led assemblies step out of the shadows and share what life inside the group was really like. It didn't start with fear. It started with warmth. Survivors described being welcomed with open arms, promises of community, and answers to life's deepest questions. For many, the assemblies filled a void. But once inside, that warmth slowly turned into something much colder. Rules dictated everything: what you wore, who you spoke to, even what thoughts you were allowed to have. Survivors recall constant monitoring, where doubt was seen as betrayal, and betrayal came with consequences. Fear was woven into every sermon, every gathering. Survivors say they were warned that leaving meant eternal damnation, or worse. Some spoke of whispered threats, others of seeing members shunned and erased. The message was clear: once inside, leaving was not an option. When asked about Ruben and Emilio, survivors didn't have answers, but they had suspicions. Many had seen others forced out, silenced, or made examples of. The vanishings of Ruben and Emilio fit into a larger pattern of fear and control. Escaping the assemblies was not easy. Survivors described sneaking away in the dead of night, hiding with relatives, or even fleeing across state lines. Even after leaving, the psychological grip remained. Many still fear retaliation to this day, which is why most speak only under anonymity. The survivors' stories paint a chilling picture: a community built on control, silence, and fear. And while their words don't solve the mystery of Ruben and Emilio, they reveal just how dangerous the assemblies could be. The question now becomes, if survivors saw the warning signs, why didn't authorities act sooner? In the next chapter, we follow the investigators, the people who tried to unravel the mystery from the inside. This is Chapter 12, The Investigators. When two men vanish without a trace, the responsibility to find answers falls on those trained to uncover the truth. But in the case of Ruben Moreno and Emilio Gainem, the investigators faced a labyrinth of silence, secrecy, and shadows. When Ruben disappeared in 2019, investigators treated it like most missing adult cases. Adults have the right to walk away, they reasoned. And without evidence of a crime, the case quickly went cold. It was filed, noted, and left waiting. But when Emilio vanished 4 years later, patterns emerged. This time, detectives could not ignore the similarities: two men, both linked to the same religious group, both gone without explanation. Investigators tracked Ruben's last known steps. They interviewed friends, checked phone records, and searched areas he was last seen. For Emilio, the same steps were repeated. But in both cases, the trail ended abruptly, as if the men had vanished into thin air. Soon, the investigation turned toward the his way spirit-led assemblies. Detectives asked questions, but were met with closed doors. Members refused to speak. Leaders offered vague answers or none at all. Without cooperation, investigators could prove little. But the suspicion was undeniable. Frustrated by delays, Ruben's and Emilio's families turned to private investigators. These independent detectives dug deeper, interviewing former members, gathering tips, and connecting patterns law enforcement had overlooked. But without subpoena power, their work could only go so far. Was this a case of foul play carefully hidden from sight? Did Ruben and Emilio walk away under pressure? Or were they silenced to protect something bigger, secrets the assemblies did not want exposed? Investigators began to build theories, but each led to more questions than answers. Despite their efforts, investigators hit wall after wall. Without witnesses willing to speak, without physical evidence, and with years slipping away, the trail grew colder. Every unanswered question deepened the frustration, not just for the families, but for the investigators themselves. The investigators revealed a disturbing picture: a group shrouded in secrecy, a trail that vanished into shadows, and two families left without closure. But even as their efforts slowed, another force kept the mystery alive: the voices of those outside the investigation. In the next chapter, we turn to the wider community, how neighbors, activists, and former members joined together to keep Ruben and Emilio's stories from being forgotten. This is Chapter 13, The Community Speaks. When official channels stalled, it was the community that picked up the torch. Families, neighbors, former members, and activists became the investigators, the messengers, and the voice for Ruben and Emilio. Their mission was simple: to make sure these men were never forgotten. No one feels the silence of a disappearance more deeply than family. Ruben's relatives held prayer vigils, circulated flyers, and gave interviews wherever they could. Emilio's family followed the same path years later, desperate not just for answers, but for someone to keep listening. The disappearances rippled through the community. Neighbors organized search parties, churches outside the assemblies offered support, and volunteers combed nearby fields and backroads. For many, this wasn't just about Ruben and Emilio, it was about protecting others from meeting the same fate. Perhaps the most powerful voices came from those who had once been inside. Former members, now free from the assemblies, risked backlash by speaking out. They gave interviews, attended rallies, and shared their stories to strengthen the family's fight. Activists specializing in cult awareness and human rights joined the cause. They brought national attention to what might have otherwise remained a local tragedy. Journalists wrote articles, podcasters investigated, and eventually the disappearances became a rallying cry for accountability. In a digital age, the fight extended online. Hashtags like #WhereIsRuben and #JusticeForEmilio began trending in local networks. Online forums buzzed with theories, while support groups formed to share updates and keep pressure on authorities. The louder the voices became, the harder it was for anyone to ignore the case. The community's persistence kept the case alive. They could not provide all the answers, but they ensured the questions never faded. And while their voices grew louder, so too did the whispers of those who stood in the Assembly's defense. In the next chapter, we turn to the other side of the story, the people who still believe in the group, and what they have to say about the disappearances. This is Chapter 14, The Believers. For every voice crying out against the assemblies, there are others who defend it with conviction. To them, his way Spirit-led assemblies is not a place of fear, but of faith. A sanctuary. A family. They call themselves the believers, and they insist the world has misunderstood their community. Inside the assemblies, members describe a life built on devotion and order. Leaders are revered as spiritual guides, chosen by God. To question them is seen not as rebellion, but as sin. When asked about Reuben and Emilio, loyal members grow defensive. Some say the men left voluntarily, tired of the faith. Others suggest the families are exaggerating. A few even insist that the disappearances are inventions of hostile outsiders determined to destroy the assemblies. The believers lean on faith, not evidence. To them, accusations are nothing more than tests from the outside world. Their loyalty creates an invisible wall one investigators, families, and survivors cannot break through. Much of the loyalty is rooted not just in faith, but in the leader himself. Charismatic, commanding, and viewed as God's chosen vessel, he holds sway over every aspect of life inside. To the faithful, his word is beyond question. For investigators and families, the believers remain the greatest obstacle. They refuse interviews, deny access, and close ranks around their leader. Some even accuse the victims' families of spreading lies. This wall of silence has made it nearly impossible to uncover the truth. The believers' words echo with certainty, but their certainty raises deeper questions. Are they protecting a man of God or hiding something much darker? In the next chapter, we step back and examine the broader pattern, how disappearances, secrecy, and silence echo across other groups like the Assemblies. This is Chapter 15, The Pattern of Disappearances. Reuben Moreno and Emilio Gainham are not the first to disappear around a group that demanded loyalty above all else. Their vanishings echo a chilling pattern, one that stretches across states, decades, and religious movements. A pattern where silence is enforced, fear is weaponized, and people simply vanish. In the 1970s, members of Jim Jones's People's Temple began disappearing when they defied their leader. Some fled and never resurfaced. Others were silenced permanently before the Jonestown tragedy claimed hundreds of lives. The same whispers haunted the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. People who tried to leave were cut off, threatened, or never heard from again. Beyond the high-profile cases lie smaller, lesser-known groups, stories that barely made headlines. From breakaway sects in rural America to isolated religious communes, families have reported missing sons, daughters, and spouses, always with the same airy denial from within the group. The pattern is unmistakable. Loyalty is demanded. Questions are punished. Disappearances are explained away or ignored entirely. Experts in cult behavior argue that disappearances often serve a purpose, reinforcing control. If one member vanishes, others are reminded of what can happen when loyalty falters. Fear spreads silently, and obedience tightens. Reuben and Emilio's disappearances may not have been random tragedies. Instead, they could represent the continuation of this larger, chilling cycle. Families, investigators, and survivors all point to the same conclusion: the Assembly story looks disturbingly familiar. The danger of ignoring the pattern is clear. Each disappearance that goes unanswered strengthens the next group's ability to silence. History repeats itself, not because we forget, but because we fail to act. Reuben and Emilio's names are now part of a much larger story, one that demands recognition before more vanishings are added to the list. The pattern is undeniable. But a pattern without answers still leaves families in darkness. What really happened to Ruben and Emilio? Were they victims of something sinister, or did they choose to disappear? In the next chapter, we return to the heart of the mystery, laying out the theories, the evidence, and the possibilities. This is Chapter 16, The Theories. In each case, those who questioned authority, or threatened to expose it, often vanished without a trace. The timing was never random. It was strategic. When two disappearances occur within the same organization, separated by time but united by secrecy, we can no longer treat them as coincidence. They fit into a larger, repeating story we've seen before. If Ruben and Emilio are part of a broader pattern, then their disappearances are not accidents, but warnings. To understand why people vanish in groups like this, we must first understand the psychology that binds them to leaders, even against their own survival. How does a community of believers transform into a place where silence is valued over truth, and loyalty is prized over life itself? The answer lies in psychology, a system of control carefully designed by those at the top. Cult leaders often begin as charismatic figures who promise healing, purpose, or salvation. They read people's needs, loneliness, grief, identity struggles, and offer instant belonging. Charisma isn't magic. It's manipulation disguised as inspiration. At first, I felt like I found a family. By the time I realized I couldn't leave, I had nowhere else to go. How obedience is cultivated. Strict rules, punishments, or discipline for questioning leadership. Public humiliation or fear tactics to discourage dissent. People obey authority figures even when it harms others. In the Assemblies, loyalty wasn't optional. It was survival. Cult leaders frame everything as part of a divine mission. Members believe obedience equals spiritual protection. Questioning leadership equals rebellion against God. When faith itself is weaponized, morality is no longer defined by right or wrong, but by obedience or disobedience. How can a community see people vanish, and yet say nothing? Answer. O fear of punishment. O belief that the missing person deserved it for disobedience. O rationalization, leaders told them the person left voluntarily. Survivor voice, we were told not to ask questions. And after a while, you stop asking. O groupthink, loyalty to group overrides critical thinking. O cognitive dissonance, when reality clashes with belief, members change their perception instead of rejecting the group. O dependency, financial, emotional, spiritual reliance on the group. Once you understand the psychology, you realize disappearances don't happen in silence by accident. They happen because silence has been carefully engineered. But if silence is engineered, what happens when law enforcement tries to break through? When people vanish, families turn to law enforcement for answers. But in cases tied to secretive religious groups, the system designed to protect often struggles, sometimes even fails. The nature of missing person cases. Explain how U.S. missing persons investigations work. Adults have the legal right to disappear. Police often assume no crime unless there's clear evidence. Burden of proof is high. Families must often prove foul play, not the other way around. If an adult walks away voluntarily, that's not a crime. And cult leaders know this loophole all too well. Jurisdiction and limitations. Local police versus federal authorities. Local police may lack training in cult dynamics. FBI often only steps in if there's evidence of trafficking, financial fraud, or interstate crime. In Ruben and Emilio's case, disappearances treated as isolated events, not connected. No forced entry, no clear evidence, cases stall. Narrator adds weight. In a system that requires hard proof, silence itself becomes the perfect cover. The wall of silence from members. Police interviews with Assemblies members often lead nowhere. Members insist Ruben and Emilio left voluntarily. Some refuse to cooperate, citing religious freedom. Survivor testimony. We were told to say they left. That's it. And if the police came asking, that's all we would ever say. The Religious Freedom Shield. U.S. law protects religious groups under the First Amendment. Authorities are often reluctant to probe too deeply into religious organizations, fearing lawsuits or backlash. The line between religious freedom and criminal behavior is thin, and cult leaders exploit it masterfully. Families versus the system. Ruben and Emilio's families frustrated with lack of progress. Narrator. To families, the lack of answers feels like neglect. To police, it's a lack of evidence. And between those two realities, justice often vanishes too. Emotional clip. A family member describing how every call to law enforcement feels like hitting a brick wall. Historical parallels. Other cult cases where law enforcement failed until it was too late. Jonestown, warnings ignored until tragedy. Heaven's Gate, members' isolation wasn't illegal until mass suicide occurred. NXIVM, operated for years despite abuse claims, shielded by self-improvement branding. If law enforcement struggles to act, then who holds these groups accountable? Sometimes, it's not the police. It's the press. When official channels stall, the responsibility of truth often shifts to the public eye. And in cases like Ruben and Emilio's, the media becomes the loudspeaker for the silenced. Local news coverage. At first, Ruben's and Emilio's cases received brief mentions in local outlets. Missing man in California type of coverage. Treated as isolated disappearances, quickly overshadowed by other stories. Narrator. Without deeper context, the public saw them as statistics, just 2 more missing persons in a state where thousands vanish each year. When the story grew. The story began to gain traction as families pushed harder, contacting journalists and using social media. Independent journalists started asking, why 2 disappearances from the same religious community? Footage, clips of local rallies or vigils covered by small news crews. Action 3, the rise of true crime media. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and streaming documentaries have changed the landscape. Cases like The Keepers, NXIVM, and Missing 411 gained massive attention through these mediums. Narrator. In the age of digital media, a single podcast episode can do what months of police work cannot: force the world to look closer. Example: true crime podcasts interviewing Ruben's family, amplifying their pleas. Section 4, The Double-Edged Sword. Media coverage brings awareness, but also challenges. Sensationalism can distort facts. Families sometimes feel exploited. Groups like the Assemblies can retaliate, accusing reporters of persecution. Survivor voice. When the reporters came, I was scared. But at the same time, it felt like someone finally cared enough to ask. Investigative breakthroughs. Journalists and filmmakers sometimes uncover what police cannot. Leaked documents. Former members willing to go on record. Financial or behavioral patterns pointing to larger issues. Where law enforcement met silence, the press met whispers. And whispers, when amplified, can shake the walls of power. Shaping public perception. The Assembly's reputation began shifting once media attention exposed the connection between Ruben and Emilio's cases. Narrator. The media doesn't just report events, it reframes them. Two men missing became something else, a possible cover-up tied to a secretive religious sect. The media can shine a spotlight. But sometimes, the most powerful revelations don't come from reporters at all, they come from the shadows within. When silence is the rule, every voice that breaks it is an act of rebellion. Whistleblowers and insiders often carry the most dangerous knowledge and the most painful truths. Who are the whistleblowers? Former high-ranking members who defected. Disillusioned followers who escaped. Confidential sources leaking documents or recordings. For every person who leaves, a story leaves with them. But only a few dare to speak. Some insiders claim. Leadership tracked dissenters and punished those who spoke against them. Ruben and Emilio may have been viewed as liabilities or rebels. Members were instructed to say they had chosen to leave, the official line. Survivor voice, dramatic reading of testimony. We were told not to ask where they went. The leader said, "They're gone. They chose another path." But I never believed it. Whistleblowers face real dangers. Harassment or intimidation from loyalists. Fear of being ostracized from family still in the group. Legal threats, defamation suits, gag orders. Example parallels. NXIVM defectors harassed with lawsuits. Scientology fair game tactics used against former members. Narrator. To speak out is not just brave. In some groups, it's life-threatening. Highlight key revelations that deepen suspicion. Claims of secret disciplinary meetings where members accused of disobedience vanished afterward. Financial irregularities suggesting hush money or payoffs. Hints of connections to other shadowy networks. Visual, reenactment of a whistleblower sliding an envelope of documents across a table. The families hear the truth. Families of Ruben and Emilio react to insider testimony. If this is true, then our boys never had a chance. They didn't just disappear. They were disappeared. Emotional weight, whistleblower testimony validates the family's suspicions. The cost of truth. Some whistleblowers regret coming forward because of the consequences. Others say they'd do it again because silence protects abusers. Survivor quote. The fear never leaves you. But neither does the guilt. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. The past is disturbing. But the present may be even more dangerous. For years, silence has surrounded the Assemblies. But what does life inside this group look like today? Is it simply a church, or something far more dangerous? A closed but active community. Despite controversies, the Assemblies continue operating. Their gatherings are private, members-only events. Outsiders are not welcomed. Some locals say the compound feels like a fortress. Narrator. From the outside, it appears calm. From the inside, according to former members, little has changed. Belief system today. The group preaches strict obedience to leadership and separation from the outside world. Teachings remain apocalyptic. Members are told the outside world is corrupt, and only within the assemblies is salvation found. Survivor commentary. They've adapted their language to sound more mainstream, but the core message is the same: obey, stay loyal, don't question. Recruitment in the modern age. Unlike the past, recruitment now happens subtly. Online sermons and spiritual discussion groups. Targeting vulnerable individuals searching for meaning. The assemblies learn to blend in. In a digital age, their reach is no longer limited to their compound, it extends to anyone searching for faith online. Declining numbers, intensifying control. Membership has shrunk due to defections, deaths, and media attention. Experts warn that as groups shrink, leaders often tighten control and grow more extreme. Example parallels: NXIVM after media exposure, Branch Davidians after defections. Narrator. Fewer members doesn't always mean less danger. Sometimes, it means desperation. Public perception versus reality. Publicly, the assemblies present themselves as a peaceful faith community. Their website and outreach highlight charity, prayer, and living simply. But insiders insist these are fronts, hiding a culture of fear and secrecy. Visual, side-by-side comparison of a cheerful public sermon clip versus leaked insider testimony about punishments. What about Reuben and Emilio? Officially, leadership denies knowing what happened. Their names are not mentioned in sermons or literature. Narrator. Within the assemblies, Reuben and Emilio no longer exist. To acknowledge them would be to acknowledge the truth. Today, the assemblies still stand. But to truly understand their danger, we must step back and see how their story is part of a larger, global phenomenon. Footage of Jonestown in Guyana, 1978. Images of the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, 1993. Clips of NXIVM trials in New York, 2019. What happened in California isn't new. Throughout history, we've seen how faith, power, and control can collide, often with devastating consequences. Jonestown, the blueprint of cult control. Brief recap of Jim Jones and the People's Temple. How followers believed in salvation but ended in tragedy. 918 dead in a mass murder-suicide. Key link: charismatic leaders plus isolation equals danger. Survivor's voice: we trusted him with everything. In the end, that trust killed us. The Branch Davidians, when faith meets fire. 1993 Waco siege, David Koresh's compound, armed standoffs, and ultimate destruction. The world watched live as religion and government collided. Link: similar emphasis on obedience, apocalyptic warnings, and separation from outsiders. NXIVM, a modern-day cult. Not based on religion, but on self-help and empowerment. Behind the facade, branding, sexual exploitation, financial control. Key takeaway: control mechanisms adapt to the times. Narrator. Cults don't always hide behind the Bible. Sometimes, they hide behind self-improvement. Psychological patterns that repeat. Isolation from family/friends. Fear-based teachings. Charismatic leadership demanding absolute loyalty. Use of shame, guilt, and sometimes physical punishment. Narrator ties it back. Whether in Guyana, Texas, New York, or California, the script is hauntingly similar. Why people keep falling for it? Experts explain, humans crave belonging, structure, and purpose. Vulnerable moments, grief, searching for identity, economic struggles make recruitment easier. Quote from psychologist. Cults don't attract the weak. They attract the searching. And while history shows us how these groups rise and fall, the haunting question remains: what will be the endgame for the Assemblies? For all the parallels in history, one truth still remains: two men, Reuben and Emilio, vanished. Their families are still waiting, still asking, still hoping. The night they vanished. Timeline recap: last confirmed sightings, group activity, phone records. Inconsistencies between official statements and what ex-members recall. Suspicion of a planned cover-up: the men were questioning leadership. Narrator. Why that night? Why them? And why such silence afterward? The silence of the Assemblies. Leadership's denial: they left voluntarily. But no contact, no credit card activity, no digital footprint ever since. Ex-member testimony: when someone left, we knew. They'd at least try to reach family. This was different. It was like they never existed. Visual, faded documents, blurred faces, heavy shadows. The missing puzzle pieces. Police reports note lack of evidence of foul play, but also note restricted access to the Assembly's compound. Rumors of secret punishments or secluded rooms within the compound. Possible disposal sites speculated: forests nearby, desert land. Narrator. The investigation stalled not because there were no leads, but because there were too many walls. The families left behind. Emotional testimonies from family members. Oh, Reuben's sister: every time the phone rings, I think maybe it's him. Oh, Emilio's mother: it's like the earth swallowed him. I can't bury him, I can't hug him, I can only wait. These voices bring raw pain back to the mystery. Questions that haunt. Did Reuben and Emilio uncover something the group wanted hidden? Were they planning to escape and expose leadership? Or were they victims of ritual, punishment, or silencing? Narrator. Every theory has gaps. Every explanation leaves another question. Two men gone. No answers. No closure. But as the silence deepens, so too does the determination of those who refuse to forget. Behind every disappearance is a family that never stops searching, never stops hoping, and never stops hurting. The first days of panic. Families of Reuben and Emilio recall the first 48 hours. Oh, calls to police dismissed as maybe they just left. Oh, confusion turning to dread when no word came. Oh, desperate trips to the Assembly's compound, where doors stayed closed. Emotional voiceover: they said nothing, not even a prayer for them. Turning grief into action. Families organize search parties in nearby woods and deserts. They hire private investigators when police interest wanes. Flyers distributed in California towns, churches, even across state lines. Narrator. With little help from the authorities, the families became investigators themselves. Fighting for public awareness. Families contact journalists, true crime bloggers, and eventually reach local TV news. They begin speaking publicly, telling Ruben and Emilio's story to anyone who would listen. Parallel footage. A mother breaking down during a news interview. Community rallies with banners, bring them home. Struggle with law enforcement. Families frustrated with police hesitancy to pursue leads inside the assemblies. Some officers quietly admit they don't want to touch it due to religious freedom sensitivities. Narrator. When justice faltered, the family's trust in the system shattered. Living with the unknown. Daily toll on families. Empty chairs at dinner tables. Birthdays missed, milestones uncelebrated. Mothers and siblings clinging to hope, yet tormented by not knowing if hope is even possible. Survivor's mother, I don't want to believe my son is gone. But I can't prove he's alive either. That's the torture. The family's search turned personal grief into public crusade. But would their voices be enough to pierce the walls of secrecy? Old TV news footage, a reporter standing outside the Assemblies compound, microphone in hand, gates firmly closed behind them. For years, the story of Ruben and Emilio was whispered in family circles, ignored by officials, and buried in silence. But then, the cameras arrived. Local news breaks the story. A small-town newspaper runs a piece about the missing men. Soon after, local TV reporters begin covering the case. Families finally see Ruben and Emilio's names broadcast on the evening news. Narrator. In an instant, the mystery of two missing men became a story the entire community could no longer ignore. Social media amplification. True crime bloggers and early online forums pick up the case. Hashtags like #WhereIsRuben and #JusticeForEmilio start circulating. Visual, tweets and posts flashing across the screen, people demanding answers. Narrator. From Facebook to Twitter, strangers across the country began asking the questions law enforcement never pushed hard enough. Pressure on the assemblies. Reporters attempt to speak with Assemblies leaders, only to be met with silence or no comment. Cameras capture tense moments at the compound gates. Former members begin stepping forward, emboldened by the attention. Narrator. For the first time, the assemblies were no longer a closed secret, they were in the spotlight. Public sympathy and national coverage. Families appear on talk shows and investigative programs, pleading for answers. National outlets CNN, Dateline, 2020 begin to cover the case. Parallel montage. Emilio's mother on live TV, voice shaking. Ruben's sister holding up his missing poster during a press interview. Media's double-edged sword. Coverage brings hope, but also pain. Speculation, conspiracy theories, and rumors about the men's private lives. Trolls online claiming they wanted to disappear. For grieving families, the spotlight was both a lifeline and a burden. The spotlight grew brighter. But with the light came shadows and new revelations about what might have really happened behind those closed gates. For years, silence was enforced by fear. But as the spotlight grew brighter, former members of the assemblies began to speak, and what they revealed was chilling. Breaking the silence. The first ex-member to speak does so anonymously through a journalist. They describe the culture of intimidation. Absolute obedience to leadership. Harsh punishments for questioning doctrine. Families being pressured to cut ties with the outside world. Quote, "You didn't just leave. You either disappeared, or you were made an example." Life inside the Assemblies. Daily routines, long sermons, communal living, limited access to outside media. Leaders claim to speak directly from God, leaving no room for dissent. Any doubts were labeled sins of rebellion. Narrator. For many, the Assemblies were not a house of prayer, but a prison of control. Psychological and emotional manipulation. Fear of damnation used as control. Members shamed into giving money, possessions, even personal freedom. Women and children described as property of God through the leader. Survivor testimony, it wasn't faith. It was fear, wrapped in scripture. Ruben and Emilio's final days. Former members recall that Ruben and Emilio were openly questioning leadership. Some believe they planned to leave together, possibly to expose the group. Ex-members' chilling claim, everyone knew they were in trouble. And then, they were gone. Retaliation and fear. Some whistleblowers face harassment after speaking out. Late-night phone calls. Cars following them. Anonymous threats online. Even outside the compound, the Assembly's shadow loomed large. The blurred face of an ex-member, voice trembling. Quote, "If people knew what really happens in there, they'd understand." Ruben and Emilio didn't just vanish. They were silenced. The testimony of survivors cracked the wall of secrecy. But could their words finally force the world to act? For years, the disappearance of Ruben and Emilio was a cold case. But with pressure mounting from families, media, and former members, investigators could no longer look away. Why the case was cold. Recap of why the investigation stalled in the first place. Lack of physical evidence. Restricted access to Assemblies grounds. Law enforcement wary of infringing on religious freedom. It wasn't just a lack of clues, it was a lack of will. New testimonies spark action. Survivor accounts broadcast on TV and published in investigative pieces. Ex-members describe punishments, secret rooms, and possible burial sites. Detectives decide to re-examine the case. Investigator quote. 2 names. 2 lives. And still, no answers. Ruben and Emilio's families are left with grief that has no closure. They've waited for a call that never came. They've held on to hope that grows fainter with every passing year. And yet, the Assemblies continues, its gates open, its leaders uncharged, its secrets locked away. For investigators, this case remains a frustration, strong suspicions, unsettling evidence, but no body, no confession, no conviction. In the world of true crime, this is the bitter reality. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive neatly tied in a courtroom verdict. Sometimes, it lingers in shadows, waiting. But silence is not the end. Every retelling of this story keeps Ruben and Emilio alive. Every voice that refuses to forget them keeps pressure on the walls of secrecy. Perhaps one day, someone within the Assemblies will finally speak. Perhaps the evidence still hidden will surface. Until then, their disappearance remains an open wound and a chilling reminder that behind faith, behind devotion, even behind family, crimes can hide. This is not just the story of 2 missing men. It is the story of justice delayed. And maybe, justice denied. Asterisk. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and got something valuable or entertaining out of it. Don't forget to support the channel. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll never miss a new upload. We are sure you liked this video. Give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps us reach more people and grow our community. Stick around, because there's plenty more exciting, inspiring, and entertaining content coming your way, just one click away. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to bring you the next video. Thank you again for being here.